I see my name in shining lights. Yeah, a different city every night. Oh, I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire.
It's time to get down to business on the weekend's #1 business program. Known as the King of Networking, your host, Shalom Klein, has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and created countless jobs. So, to success. Let's get down to business.
And indeed, we're all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship and business. We talk a lot about business here. I'm with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com. And while you are there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you will not want to miss. So let's jump right in with the author of A Place for Tea, Giving Voice to the Tortoise in Our Hair-Brained World. And that's with Robert Lengel. Dr. Robert Lengel holds a bachelor's and master's in aerospace engineering, an MBA, and a PhD that blended oceanography, environmental management, leadership, and organizational dynamics in business. Dr. Lengel, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Shalom. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I know you are currently an associate professor emeritus at the University of Texas at San Antonio and president of the consulting firm LeaderWorks. So let's talk about this book, A Place for Tea. Where did this idea come together, and tell us a little bit about it?
For 30 years, I founded and ran an executive center at the University of Texas at San Antonio. My specialty work took me into situations where people had to accomplish something together, but weren't getting along. Mostly they would drop me into disaster situations and see if we could work our way out of it. I learned a lot about how to design meeting places and how to work with people who literally couldn't stand each other. All through that consulting, the issues of change, leadership development, the loss of spirit and morale were common in almost every organization as competition increases and the speed of activity increases. And when the COVID shutdown came, I was locked away from a lot of my consulting because it's a lot of face-to-face work. And I started to write essays that I published on a Facebook group site that I have. And after a whole year, I started to realize that what I was seeing in the nation, what I was seeing in Washington, what I was seeing with political polarization, were all about how we think about things, and also the places where we get to talk about it. And so that was the start of the seeds of the work for A Place for Tea. I like this idea. I started to wrap it into this fable that the tortoise speaks for our humanity. It moves slowly. It moves with emotion. It carries spirit. It stands for all the things that make us human, like loving and caring and all those sorts of things. And the hare stands for speed and cleverness. And I started to realize that spending 30 years in a business college and running MBA programs, we were teaching people how to become harebrained thinkers. And businesses tend to like harebrained thinkers, that preparing for speed, preparing for cleverness, preparing for arguments and debate, preparing to work with information. But the tortoise offered perspective. So I thought it was interesting that I see the tortoise and the hare in a race between our heads, our harebrained thinking, and our hearts, which move at a different pace of emotion and spirit. But all these things that we're seeing organizations be frustrated with, especially the all-around change, really relate to a perspective change, not to information and cleverness. So my work, I tried to capture everything that I've learned during those COVID essays and over 30 years of consulting in this book to talk about how we need to think differently, how we need to think more nuanced ways of how we meet and how we set up meetings. And basically, that's it.
Wow.
We're running too fast with our heads for our hearts to keep up. That's the basic thesis of all this. And as a result, we're suffering from, I think, a spiritual anemia in organizations and in the nation. We can't cope with the speed.
I'm chatting with Dr. Robert Lengel, who has, as you've been mentioning, worked for decades in leadership and has written this fantastic read, A Place for Tea, which truly will change how people, corporations, and organizations see themselves and the world around them. It's thought-provoking. It's filled with prescriptions for challenging the status quo. And Robert, that's where I want to take us to now in the conversation. Many of our listeners are small business owners, entrepreneurs. And I agree with many of the things that you just said in terms of sort of where the world is right now. And this is a change that has been occurring long before the pandemic and some of the changes in our work style. So what is that premise? What is the lesson that you hope a business owner that reads A Place for Tea takes and can perhaps implement during the remaining, believe it or not, only 50% of 2023?
Yeah, it just maybe to define harebrained thinking just a little bit more. I like to think of this as a garden. When an organization starts, it has resources, and I think of that as a plot of land. And on that land, there might be boulders and trees, and there might be contours that when a harebrained thinker looks at that lot and they want to maximize production from it, they tend to take the boulders out, take the trees out, level the land, and plant in rows, straight rows, linear rows, until they complete maximum planting on that plot of land. They're trying to maximize their profit. What they don't realize is at the end of this, the gardener's outside the garden is not part of it. And we've been doing that so much in our thinking, and entrepreneurs, I think, need to be aware of that when they start, there's a conversation between their hearts and their heads. They start businesses for a passion, and our harebrained thinking attacks passion and attacks spirit. So as they grow and as they institutionalize and take structure and start to create plans and convert the spirit of what they do to all these intellectual things, we tend to lose some things. For example, trust. Everybody's concerned about trust. The harebrain makes that contracts. And once we're in contracts, the spirit of trust is gone. We might have a morale problem. We might have a problem in morals and ethics. And what we do, instead of being able to stay in that spirit as the tortoise would keep us in, we wind up with laws and rules. And we take organizations as living creatures, no matter how small or big they are, and we tend to think about them in terms of organization charts, rules and plans and procedures, things that the intellect can digest. And we think of the human beings in the organization as roles. And what this does, it forces us to lead a condensed life. This is something that concerned me a lot, that I see it in students, that I ask them to read a whole book and they never do. They read the Cliff Notes and Google summaries. We're moving so fast, but there's something in the whole book that's valuable to us as human beings and as leaders in organizations.
No question about it.
We tend to, one of the things that bothers me, because I get struck into this all the time, is everybody wants my elevator speech and nobody wants to hear the whole presentation. But there's something in the whole presentation that I can't capture in the elevator. So all these reducing our communications to texts, tweets, and short sound bites eliminates the possibility that if we had more time and made them longer, we wrote longer letters and longer emails, we met for longer periods of time, there might be value in that. And
Well, unfortunately, this is a tough segue to having a wrap up our short conversation on the radio. But I know we could talk for hours, and the best thing that folks can do is to pick up a copy of the book and to read and understand. And I know you're very accessible, Dr. Robert Lengel, in continuing this conversation. I certainly look forward to bringing you back on the program. But alas, if we don't wrap up a commercial, will beat us to the punch over here. So, Robert, how can we learn more about you and pick up a copy of the book?
Well, the best place to get me right now is LinkedIn. Robert H. Last name is Lengel. I have a new website that's under construction, but it will accept communications. So it's a place for T, and that's the letter T, stands for the tortoise, .com. So you can contact me through that website also.
Fantastic. Again, Robert H. Lengel on LinkedIn, as well as just search for A Place for Tea. It's a fantastic read. Lots more to discuss. Robert, thank you so much for joining us on the program. I look forward to having you back on. We've got a lot more small business jobs and entrepreneurship when we return, so don't touch that dial. You're listening to Get Down to Business.